Happy belated Memorial Day. And pursuant to it being, you could say, a belated Memorial Day, I think we're a couple of days away from it, but I didn't do a show yesterday. What's today? Well, whatever the day is. Happy belated Memorial Day. Pursuant to that, I think we should not necessarily honor the troops blindly. I mean, after all, Memorial Day is a day where we give remembrance and honoring of the troops. And I agree with that, but I don't think we should do it blindly. I think the biggest honor or the biggest disservice that we can give is to give this kind of chicken hawk rah-rah without asking certain serious questions that needs to be asked on this notion of the ultimate sacrifice. Welcome to the Soapbox. What brings this up is that Tulsi Gabbard made a really good video. As you know, she was in service, and that's been one of her strong strident points, or one of her arguments, that, look, I was in the military, I watched my brothers and sisters pay the quote-unquote ultimate sacrifice, and this is not something that we need to do blindly. Us, as a country, needs to strongly consider the foreign military policy. It's not enough to say, I support the troops. It's also something to say on whether or not you should be putting troops in one situation after the next. After all, these guys, I've often made the argument that the sacrifices that are made in this case are not done so evenly across the country. There are certain sectors of the society that makes bank off of these people dying, and often these people putting themselves in harm's way. Weapons contractors who profit off of this notion of a more hostile world have every incentive in the world in dropping money into pockets of politicians to ensure that we have a more hostile world. A more hostile world, a more vicious world, a more dangerous world is a world that wants to arm itself. We have a president that has been running around the country, running around the world, selling arms to the various nations, almost as if he's shaking these nations down to buy weapons from the United States. It's a weird and a strange sight to see. And it's done so, for the most part, in the open. Do you honestly believe that the people who are pushing for this more hostile, more vicious world are also fighting the wars that these more vicious world usually, eventually, produces? Of course, that answer is no. There are people who are making extraordinary sums of money off of this vicious world. Our question is, whatever they want, is it in the best interest of us as Americans to be pushing for these wars, especially these regime change wars? Pursuant to that point, only 1% to 2% of the United States fights in the military. So you have a 98% that's societally dejected from this particular conversation. And I'm saying they shouldn't be. I would say that if you ask the average person, should we be involved in one conflict after the next, they would say no. That doesn't necessarily stop political leaders from saber rattling and creating this humanitarian cause that allows us to kill and maim and murder, with this notion that we did it because we had to. We destroyed Libya because we had to. We destroyed Iraq because we had to. We toppled those governments in South America because we had to. We put in those dictators in Southeast Asia because we had to. The massacres that took place during the Cold War, all of those things were necessary. All of those things had to take place for security of this nation. When you look at what the CIA was doing during that time, do you know what they allowed themselves to believe? They allowed themselves to believe we're doing this because we have to do this. We're right because we're right. It's an astonishing thing. Tulsi Gabbard questions this. And she questioned this on Memorial Day. Because, after all, we are supposed to honor the troops. Yes, we're supposed to honor the people who gave their lives in pursuit and protecting of this country. Yes. But that also means questioning on whether or not those troops should have gave their lives. You can make an argument that the troops' job in this is to do what they're told and to go and fight and die, etc., etc. But it's the responsibility of us, the rest of us, to ask whether or not it was legit, whether or not they should. I have family that's in the military. I don't want my cousin fighting in some war that somebody in the United States pushed just because they wanted some kind of geopolitical interest or some kind of corporate interest. Those are questions that we honestly, definitely need to ask. Should we engage in one regime change war after the next? And should we continue that policy? And is that policy for the best of all of us? Or is it only the best for a very small section of the population? We are not a United States. And the problems that are visited upon us are not visited upon us evenly, especially in this notion of the ultimate sacrifice. Let's hear Tulsi talk about this. She's served, and she has a very particular point of view based on the fact that she served. Let's hear her out.
I've served as a soldier for over 16 years and served in Iraq in 2005 in a medical unit where every day I was confronted with the high human cost of war. I remember those who I served with, who gave their lives in service to our country. And I think of my friends who are still serving in harm's way today. So nothing angers me more than to see the hypocrisy every Memorial Day by warmongering politicians and media pundits who feign sympathy for those who paid the ultimate price.
I will rewind this video. I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at Tulsi. It's this line. Nothing angers me more. Nothing angers me more than blah, 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 blah. And there is no deviation in what she's saying. If it angers you, Tulsi, it should anger you. Right. I'm not saying you should flip out and rip your shirt off, but I am saying if you're angered by it, you should show the fact that you're angered by it. That's all I'm saying. The words and what you're saying should coincide. It shouldn't be they shouldn't be working against each other. That's all. Let's play this one more time.
I've served as a soldier for over 16 years and served in Iraq in 2005 in a medical unit where every day I was confronted with the high human cost of war. I remember those who I served with, who gave their lives in service to our country. And I think of my friends who are still serving in harm's way today. So nothing angers me more than to see the hypocrisy every Memorial Day by warmongering politicians and media pundits who feign sympathy for those who paid the ultimate price in service to our country while simultaneously advocating for more counterproductive regime change wars, the new Cold War and arms race. The way to honor our troops who sacrifice their lives for our country is to work to prevent unnecessary, costly wars, which will result in the death of many more of my brothers and sisters in uniform. Memorial Day is a time to remember that war should only be waged as the very last resort to keep the American people safe.
I think that's an important point. The point of war should be done at the last resort, not necessarily the first hammer that they go to. Because we have a dominating military that we're spending $1 trillion a year for, we use that as somewhat of a first resort. The American public has gotten to this habit of let's rah-rah the troops, and saying anything about the military in this case is tantamount to saying something bad about the troops. That's nonsense. Utter nonsense. Why do you want your American citizens, your sons, your daughters, your brothers, who made the decision that they wanted to, for whatever reason, some people get into it because they're poor, some people get into it, believe it or not, it was like half weren't poor. That's the amazing part. I know there's this notion that everybody who gets into the military is somehow poor. That's not necessarily true, but many people get in because they actually want to serve their country. They believe in this notion of serving their country. Why do you want those people going into various places around the globe, bashing in the heads of the various places around the globe? Why do you want that? Why do you want them? Why do you want that on their conscience? Why do you want them doing that? It's one thing if we're at war, if there are barbarians at our gates. There are no barbarians at our gates. There are no barbarians at our gates. You honor the troops, but not having that being the first tool that you go to. You honor them by letting war be the last resort. But that's not what has been taking place. Tulsi Gabbard is getting into this notion of trying to have a conversation about how we use military and about the U.S. foreign policy. And I got to be honest, for one, I am totally on board for that conversation. Calling out the military, I'm still waiting for the candidate who will call out the military as the murdering training program that it actually is. They lie and bribe poor people to enlist. Yes, that's true. They train them to murder other people who did not attack them and abandon them after. Yes, that's true. That's the military. But see, if you do that, then you're calling out the military almost as a whole. I guess nobody will ever do that, because ultimately the military is kind of like a gun. You point them. You have civilian control of the military. If you're going to call it a murder and training program, then the people you need to point that against are the people who are using the military in this fashion, if that makes sense. We don't have a military that's a thing unto itself. We have a military that is under civilian control. The President of the United States is supposedly the commander-in-chief. He determines. He chooses. They're a training program because we allowed them to be a training program. Kills for a living. Jamarl, these types of videos don't work anymore. There's a reason of how Tulsi and her campaign is so out of touch. You keep referencing chess. Well, Tulsi's a pawn. She has one move and it's trash. She's boring and uninspiring. Sick of it. How do you... You're acting as if every candidate that's in the race needs to have one very specific objective, and I don't believe that's true. And also, you never touch that point of her getting into the debates. Like, that's the point you never touch. And all of these that you've, went after me on, you never touch that point. Tulsi Gabbard getting into the debates. And what does that mean in the context of the debates? I agree with you. There's a monotone to the way Tulsi delivers a message. But all candidates are one-trick pony. It's just a trick that you like or you don't like. If you notice, all of the candidates that are known are things that they're known for. Elizabeth Warren hates bankers. That's her trick. Bernie Sanders, the socialist, that's his trick. Tulsi Gabbard, anti-war, that's her trick. The ones that don't have a trick, who are they? You have no idea. They don't exist. Joe Biden is Joe Biden. He's the creepy, handsy former vice president. Nobody else is on that page. Like, I'm just trying to make that very specific point. All candidates are a one-trick pony. The question is, do you like or dislike the trick? That trick is the thing that makes them known. Arms sales. Of course, the president needs to sell arms to other countries. How else are we going to replace the arms we keep blowing up people with their explosives? But if we're selling them to other countries, it's not our arms being blown up, if that makes sense. He's selling these things because we're the number one arms contractor around the world. That's our business. The money that these arms contractors get, they pay for, you can say, jobs. The arms manufacturing industry, what Donald Trump probably understands, is a jobs program within the United States. Now, you don't have to have the military as being arms a jobs program. All of those bombs, boats, ships, they have to be built, and every time they're blown up, they have to be replaced. They're a jobs program. If you cut the military budget in half, what does it mean for the jobs? That's the question. I mean, honestly, if you're talking about politics, part of the reason they keep increasing the military budget is because where do you go if you cut the military budget? Where does that money go? Where does that money go? Or what is that money going to be taken from? That's the interesting question. Nobody has ever asked Tulsi that. Sokol. Any Navy pilot who suggests high maneuverability fast objects or UFOs has never gone up vs a Sukhoi 27 flanker. Comparing an FA-18 Super Hornet to a Sukhoi 27 flanker is like comparing a 1993 Corolla to a 2019 Maserati. I have no idea what that means. I don't know the just like that. I can talk about the wars. I can't talk necessarily always about the hardware. But fair enough. But come on. All of these military fighters are roughly equivalent. I mean, yes, some may go a little bit faster. Some may have more maneuverability. Each have their thing that they... But we're talking about something that made these planes look like they were standing still. And these guys are like flying at Mach speeds, and this thing is like moving at a rate that would kill the pilot. Whatever US, Chinese, Russian, whatever the plane is, whatever new technology you might think they have, if that technology doesn't have inertial dampeners that would allow the human being that's in that to withstand G-forces that are obscene, then we're talking about something else. We're talking about something else. Soviet plane or whatever, or Russian plane or whatever. Poke. Just because Nico is so far up Tulsi's ass that he's eating poke out of the Big Allen doesn't make her a bad candidate. Exactly. Or invalidate her position. Exactly. Her shit still stinks like the rest of us. She's better than most, but she's still subject to Democrat functionary. Okay, that's funny on a few counts. Nico up Tulsi's ass. Hey, I'm not going to begrudge a man for being headlong in somebody's ass. So I'm not going to begrudge him for that. Or eating anything out of it. To each his own. She's not a bad candidate. Agree with that. Her shit's still saying, yeah, she's subject to criticism, like the rest of us. The problem is the criticism were substanceless. There was no substance in that. It was just, Nico is a conspiracy theorist and he likes Tulsi. That was it. That was just like the Russian thing. These 3 people who don't believe we should have war with Russia likes Tulsi Gabbard. Oh. I mean, it gets obscene at a certain point. You have to ask, why are these people doing that? It's utterly absurd. It really is. It gets obscene. Not engaging in wars. Not engaging in costly regime change wars and not engaging in justified wars feel like a half measure as it opens the door to justify wars. Yes, that's true. When was the last time a war was actually justified? America is not under foreign threat. No, I agree with you. And I think our point is the justified war and the regime change wars are somewhat different. Like, we changed our name from the Department of Defense, the Department of War to the Department of Defense. It should remain the Department of War. That's what it's been. Nobody is attacking us. We're not, there's no barbarian at our gates. And beyond there's no barbarian at our gates, we're creating our monsters. One of the points that Tulsi is making here is, look, every time you topple a government, every time, you kill some leader in a particular country, you're pissing people off in those countries because those people realize that they are a sovereign country and you are trespassing on their sovereignty in a way that we would not tolerate. Like, that's a point that needs to be stressed. We have an odd perspective in America. We haven't had our buildings, not talking about, yes, 9/11, but we haven't had our buildings being taken down in one city after the next, like we've had, like in the UK and many of these other countries that were engaged in like a full-bore war. And even when we were engaged in war, in World War I and World War II, again, we were somewhat on the outskirts of that war. We weren't being directly hit. So this public is, to some degree, disengaged in the real cost of that war. We don't have a real full, understanding of what it means to have your cities bombed, to have, somebody else's plane, a foreign soldier occupying your particular land or your particular environment. Nor do we fully engage this notion of the pressures that are on soldiers that are there. Understand what I mean? Bob can be an extraordinarily nice person in the United States as a tax accountant, but the moment that you put Bob in a foreign country where you're telling Bob that he can kick indoors and somebody has killed one of Bob's friends, Bob becomes a horrible fucking person. And Bob is terrorizing a community where Bob should not even be in the first place. There's a cost to war. Yes. And that cost is not expressed evenly. And yeah, we're not under threat. Come on, for fuck's sake. The President of the United States is ramping up pressure on Iran. Iran hasn't attacked us. We've toppled their government once and we're trying to do it again. Iran hasn't attacked us. For fuck's sake, come on. I agree with you. Let's see. Ziggy the chess god was at NASCAR this weekend, stopped as the car's mid-race for a moment of silence. I almost got in a fight with someone when said, "We don't kneel at NASCAR." Oh, that's funny. Keep doing the Lord's work, Jamal. Donald Smith. Thank you, Donald. Ziggy the chess god. I replied, "Yeah, I know you do silence in moments and in total, which is why the soldiers are dead to begin with and need your remembrance." Yes. Because you're making a damn good point. You guys are doing this moment of silence stuff when really the argument is, should the soldiers be over there in the first place? That's never engaged. Like, whether the war should take place in the first place is never engaged. You know how you honor the soldiers? By keeping them alive. You know how you keep them alive? By not getting into bullshit wars. Zuggy the chess god, fucking A. Donald Smead, what do you think about Tulsi or the other candidates switching military-industrial complex spending into space-industrial complex spending? If the focus is frontiersmanship and setting the United States in the future, you're essentially, if that's true, if you're right, Donald Smead, then capitalism will go on for a very long time. The collapse of the capitalistic system will be stayed. That's my prediction. If part of my fear about the UFO stuff is that there are people who are trying to knock that issue into the daylight. And I ask why. Now, I've been one of those people, as I said before, one of those hippies running out like like raising a sign on the top of the Eiffel Tower, top of the Empire Interstate building, screaming, "Space brother, that's me." I'm the guy who gets weepy-eyed when I'm watching, I can't think of the name of that show, but there's a scene where it's like all of these aliens are shaking hands with human beings because of, God, what's the name of the movie? The movie was horrible. But that scene was the best scene on the planet. You had all of these nations around the world that got their shit together, and they're putting up a space thing. And it gets to the point where this space thing allows aliens to come on, and it's like the first time that man shakes hands with an alien human being. I was like, oh, this is awesome. By the same token, in reality, though, that's not probably how that's going to work. How that's probably going to work is we need to spend more money on military-industrial programs because there's something invading our airspace that we don't know what it is. That is terrifying. That is a terrifying, terrifying prospect. Because understand what that means. Understand what that means. The fear of the other is often put forth in human terms. The Chinese, the Japanese, the German, the Russian. It's put forth in these terms of these guys are going to take over and they're going to rape your women and they're going to, run roughshod over your rights, etc., etc. The Muslim is going to force you into Sharia law and you're going to be worshiping mosques. It's usually cut in those terms. And it's often cut in terms, though, where you have $1 trillion that you're spending on military weaponry where you always remain the upper hand. You're terrified of something that doesn't quite exist. By the same token, it's something different when there's something coming to our planet. We don't know what it is. And their technology clearly are vastly beyond ours because they can get to our planet. They're using some kind of physics that we don't know. We need to invest trillions upon trillions into figuring out what this is. That's terrifying to me. That's a terrifying reality to me. Because A, it's always in the dark. Whereas the human element of this is, yeah, these guys may do something, but you always know what that something is. It may be a bomb. It may be a missile. It may be... This other thing is completely black. It's completely black. That terrifies me. They're trying to push this issue into the broad daylight. And the question is, be careful what you wish for. It is not going to be the Space Brother stuff. It's going to be this notion of we need to spend more money in the military. Not let's have, this reconciliation commission to figure out what this is. It's not going to be that. Trust me on this. I've observed politics for the last several years. And there is nothing in these people that you look at. I mean, for fuck's sake, you have Donald Trump in office. You have our political instrument is completely hollow or tone deaf to the public. You don't believe me? Why do you think half the country don't vote? Do you realize when they do stats and they figure out, how responsive the political instrument to the public wishes, statistical noise. Don't get me wrong, it's not that it can't be responsive, it just takes a huge amount of pushing of it to make it responsive. And it's not even a situation that not only is it not responsive, it could be responsive and it could be working into your interests. But again, it takes a public will to make that true. And while the public bitches and moans about it, the public looks at it as, we can't do anything about it. When I was looking at that Bernie Sanders video the other day and I said, God, the guy's so weak. And people was like, oh, he's not weak because he's crying. He's not weak because he's crying. He is weak because he's crying. Because the fact of the matter is the political instrument is malleable. It just has to be moved. And between crying and being angry, I take angry any day of the week. The hit against Tulsi Gabbard, I think, is that she's so calm. She's more monotone. And there are moments where anger is the justified response for a human being that has an emotional faculty. When you're making this argument that they're sending my brothers and sisters off to die, for what? For what? Why are these guys out here dying? Why are we spending $7 trillion? We're hunting people down in caves. At the height of the Iraq war, we were spending nearly $800 billion. Do you know we're spending that roughly now? We're not at war with anybody. This is just a giveaway. Yeah, I'm off topic. Alright, I'm going to end this because I have other videos that I want to do. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal and Patreon. And by the way, the Patron Appreciation episodes are up on Patreon and they have been cut to make it easier for people to see. My wife and I do a damn good show, and I think that show is awesome. So, I'll see you guys in a few moments. Give me about 5-10 minutes. Thanks all. And oh, wait. Don't want to miss anybody. Arms wars. I almost missed it. The arms selling donation was a joke, as we must sell human arms to replace the arms we keep blowing off people with our military. Oh, by the way, talking about human arms, do you know that they've, if I'm not mistaken, this was in Israel, but I could be wrong, they grew a human heart, or they grew a frog's heart or something. But they were able to get the thing to beat and everything else. But they were able to do it using, what is it called? Replication. They were using like a replicator, but it's not a replicator. It's a, you know how when they use a pattern and they just allow the computer to fill in like a fabric or something with the pattern. They were using cells within the pattern in order to grow it. It's an amazing thing. They're getting closer and closer to this notion of growing organs, which would be an amazing thing. All right, right here. Kills for a living. Tulsi can't sell her trick. That's my point. I don't agree with that. She's boring. People don't care about boring. Well, I sat most people. So people being on a debate stage changes nothing. Her message won't stick, but you won't believe that till you see it. Yes, I already see it. Okay, fair enough. At least you agree with me on that point. Oh, we can agree to disagree on that point. We'll find out on the debate stage. Just everybody remembers, Kills for a Living says this message won't connect. Now the question becomes, what does it mean connect? Does it push the other candidates to the left on these issues? Maybe. Does it force Joe Biden and other neocons on stage to defend their position? Yes, absolutely. Like, I guess that's what we're missing. That's where our disconnect is. I want her on that debate stage. I want people reacting to her on that debate stage. Even if she has no chance, even say her percentage of winning is 0.25. If she says something about anti-war in Venezuela, does Joe Biden have to respond to her? Yes. Yes, he does. Does it make Joe Biden defend a pro-war stance? Yes, it does. Absolutely, it does. Why wouldn't you want that? But a person with nothing to lose going after Joe Biden, why wouldn't you want that? I don't understand that part. Why wouldn't you want that? That seems to be the greatest thing on the planet. A person with nothing to lose punching Joe Biden in the gut. I want that. I definitely want that on the debate stage. Frog's heart. That's what it was. Jamal's kidney will come next week. From your mouth or from your tweet to their ears, Baltazar. From your tweet to their ears. No more cadaver transplants for me. I'm not doing that again. And by the way, it's not that it's bad. It's just when it fails, it's miserable. All right, guys. I'll see you guys in about 10 minutes. Thanks all.